The Dutch East India Company, the company of power, organization and profit. In early 1600s, Netherlands established this company to operate and monopolize the East Indies trade. It was established during a time period after the Portuguese went to India, but failed to dominate in the 15th and the 16th centuries, and before the British went to India and dominated the area. The Dutch East India Company was dependent to the Netherlands. However, since the communications between India and Netherlands was not great, it had a de facto independence. The Dutch East India Company had powers such as to wage war, to take and execute prisoners, to coin money, to negotiate treaties, and to establish colonies. It did all of this. That is, the company was historically an exemplary company state, rather than a pure for-profit corporation. Moreover, with increasing importance of foreign posts, the company is often considered the world's first true transnational corporation.
Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Ordinary Congress of our company. Tonight, we are going to talk about our well-developed network in Asia. As you know, after establishing well-organized trade network, we managed to take a position. The trade with the Mughals, China, and other profitable markets. These years, we are struggling to monopolize the trade in nutmeg, maize, and cloves, and we sell these spices across European kingdoms and the Mughal Emperor Akbar. And we also gained a rapid acceleration in economic progress in Southeast Asia. Now, Colin, as a general governor, could you give us some brief information about our initial years in this business? As you know, in this council, there are many customers who don't know our activities right now.
Well, thank you for the brief introduction, Mr. Ottoman. Our established system goes well nowadays. Firstly, conflict between Catholics and Protestants became useful for our trade activity. Protestant merchants who had fled Antwerp brought not only their capital, above all their trading contacts and their knowledge of modern trading methods and organizational forms. By this way, Amsterdam became a center of expertise and information that enabled us to make direct trade with Asia.
Absolutely. By this way, we can hire the most able geographers and navigation experts who are commonly available in here.
The Dutch East India Company was already successful and strong even in the very beginning. Since Netherlands' financial system was far better than any other country in Europe, and the Dutch East India Company had government funding and military support. Since it had government funding, it was very hard for another company to emerge allowing competition.
So, can we talk about what leads us to establish this company?
Trade with ships are, as you know, very dangerous and risky to investment because of dangers of piracy, disease, and shipwreck. The main reason of the unifying different investors under one company is the interplay of inelastic demand and relatively elastic supply of spices. To manage such risk, the forming of a cartel to control supply would seem logical.
In the period between 1600 and 1800, the Dutch East India Company made almost 4,800 voyages to the Far East, eliminating almost all of its competitors, such as the British EIC, which only made 2,500 voyages. The Dutch East India Company made its own sea charts and created various navigation instruments in their own workshops. Both trade goods and utilities were taken along on the voyages to the Far East, including textiles, wines, paints, food, water, tools, spare parts, and ammunition. However, the most important part of the cargo was gold and silver, which were to be used for purchases. On average, a voyage would take 8 months.
A well-organized trading enterprise and a strong Dutch position in Asian waters would affect the Spanish-Portuguese power. By this way, he could compete with all rivals, the Portuguese and Spanish traders. So now, can you give us some information about our organization systems?
Well, trade without war without trade cannot be maintained. We are taking constant attacks from the Portuguese, but thanks to our organizational methods and thanks to our great government's funding, we will always be stronger than any other country in the world, and we will always continue our trade with the Southeast Asian countries.
Okay. Gentlemen, we are producing and selling some...
Batavia, now it's called as Jakarta, was the main settlement built by the Dutch East India Company and the center of a large trade network. In the following centuries, it bought the lands surrounding Batavia and nearby ports to protect the trade. The Dutch East India Company was responsible for large local and regional trade. Silk from China, gold from Japan, textiles and species from India, and cinnamon from Ceylon were just some of the important goods that were traded. However, the Dutch East India Company has been criticized for its monopolistic policy, exploitation, colonialism, uses of violence, and slavery. For example, in the 1620s, almost the entire native population of Banda Islands was driven away, starved to death, or killed in an attempt to replace them with Dutch plantations. These plantations were used to grow cloves and nutmeg for export. Consequently, socio-economic changes in Europe, the shift in power balance, and less successful financial management resulted in a slow decline of the Dutch East India Company between 1720 and 1799. After the financially disastrous Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, the company was nationalized in 1796 and finally dissolved in 1799. All assets were taken over by the government, and what remains of its trade legend is now in the historical books.